you have some interesting running backs, which is a nice segue into our next question. These guys are sometimes second rounders, a lot of times third rounders. Let's call them mid-second to mid-third. This whole tier gets cleaned up. Derrick Henry, the big dog, now in Baltimore. Devon Achane, Travis Etienne, and Josh Jacobs. 4 of them. 2 of them on new teams. 2 of them younger backs that sort of broke out last year, both playing in the state of Florida. So it's Henry, Devon Achane, let's go Travis Etienne or Josh Jacobs. Pick one only, Coop.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Henry just doesn't really fit the profile that I draft here. I mean, you look at James Cook last year. He had the 3rd most yards from scrimmage of any back, right? You would expect that player to be a top 10 back. In PPR points per game, he was RB19. And that's because he had a mobile quarterback that didn't like dumping it down. He led all the running backs in targets, but it's hard to get, when your QB doesn't like dumping it down, it's hard to get more than 50 or so. Derrick Henry's never even really had 50 targets or so. So I don't expect him to be a huge part of that game. Etienne and Achane, they're obviously exciting, especially Achane. But for me, I got to say my piece here about Josh Jacobs, brother, because you talk about Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley. What exactly do they do and what situation are they in that Josh Jacobs can't do the same thing? I mean, all 3 of them got paid $40 million to be the starting back for good offenses. People worry about Marshawn Lloyd, but I'm an A.J. Dillon, I guess, but I'm less worried about those guys than I am about Anthony Richardson and Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts was scoring a rushing touchdown a game. So was Anthony Richardson, actually, right? 4 games, 4 touchdowns. That scares me a lot more than Marshawn Lloyd. And Josh Jacobs, oh, yes, he did have a down year in his efficiency metrics. You could say what you will about him. But guess what? Go and look at Saquon Barkley's stats. He had a year where he had 3.7 yards per attempt on a terrible Giants team. That's what happens on terrible teams. Now he's on a good team where he can fall backwards into a ton of touchdowns. I don't see why Barkley and Taylor need to go so much higher than Josh Jacobs. If you really boil it down, either Jacobs should go higher or they should go lower. So that, for me, has me drafting a lot of Jacobs at ADP. If I'm on the clock, though, and I have to take one, that's kind of a different call. But I love the ADP for Jacobs.
So for me, I'm going to fade Jacobs in this range. For me, it's a lot of tread on the tires, new team situation.
More than Barkley? Barkley's older and he's more injured. I'll let you say your piece, actually.
Well, I'll go. I like Barkley. I like Barkley as a talent, and I'll lean to Philadelphia's offense being better than Green Bay's offense this year. Just sort of a gut shot. But I do think Green Bay's on the way up, and I think Marshawn Lloyd, when healthy, is going to be a little bit of an annoying presence for Josh Jacobs managers. For me, when I'm choosing a running back in this range, I think Etienne, I think Henry's fine, but for me, it's Devon Achane. I think, like, when we're talking about a player could break fantasy from the 3rd round, you're starting to see him living in the 2nd round. I think he's actually going to pass these guys by in ADP when we're getting all the reports that he's being utilized as a receiver, and then we actually see it. This is a guy that's being described as he could be the number 3 target on Miami. Plus, we know he's capable of ripping off 40-yard runs like nothing. On less than 110 carries last year, he led the NFL in runs over 40 yards. He tied for the league lead among all rookies in touchdowns. The bull case scenario is this is like a CJ2K like situation. And when I'm able to get him in this range in the 3rd round, it's an absolute swing for the fences situation. I think he's just a tremendous talent and one that I'm definitely betting on in this range of the draft. I got to kick it to your preferred.
Let me ask you a couple. Let me ask you a couple quick questions on that one. Who do you think scores more rushing touchdowns this year, Marshawn Lloyd or Raheem Mostert?
Well, I think Mostert does, but I think also the pie is going to be larger in Miami, much larger.
You think so? You think Miami's that much better offense than Green Bay?
I think when it comes down to it, if I had to bet on a team finishing with more points per game than any other team in the NFL, I think Miami would be right now possibly my choice to finish number 1. Green Bay last year, we saw them right around 12th in fantasy scoring. I think they'll be a little bit better, but I don't think they're like a break fantasy type situation. And also propensity to use 2 running backs, that's something that LaFleur continually does. So the argument that another running back is going to take away touches, historically, that's something they always did with Aaron Jones, mixing in guys like A.J. Dillon. Now you have potential for Marshawn Lloyd and also a little bit of annoying presence, A.J. Dillon, best shape of his life scenario in the second half of the year. So for me, it's a Jacobs was not efficient last year. Agreed that a lot of it was based on the offense. And also when we look at Jacobs, like his age, he's not super, super old, but he came in the league when he was like 20.
Right.
There's a ton of tread on the tire there. He's just like, I get it. If he falls to the 4th round, I'm sort of open to it. But in the third round, I don't see him having that same sort of ceiling that I see from like a Devon Achane, even an ETN, I think, with the receiving upside. So
I just worry with the Dolphins that they're going to have to throw more. I mean, the defense, they lost a lot of pieces like Christian Wilkinson. And on the line, they lost Connor Williams. They lost Robert Hunt. Robert Hunt got $100 million to leave the Dolphins. So I don't know. I'm a little worried about the split there. But for me, the at the end of the day, my argument is more maybe we're overdrafting Taylor and Barkley compared to Jacobs. That's kind of what I want to get in there. I mean,
no, 100%.
You can't really go wrong in that range, honestly.
1,000,000% agree with you on the guys at the 1-2 turn are probably not the guys I would take at the 1-2 turn either. Let's go to a position that you're kind of synonymous with. You know, we're going to talk about the tight end position every single week here at Redraft in 5. But for this specific show, we're going to look at two separate questions. These guys are all clustered in ADP, and you're starting to see these guys go inside of the first round a little bit more often with some of these injuries, especially in FFPC. In other formats like NFFC, you're talking about these guys end of the third round, but in tight end premium, these guys are steamed up. You've got old man Travis Kelce. Last year, his points per game dropped significantly, dropped down to 14.5 points per game after 18.5 points per game in standard PPR leagues in 2022. Then you've got the two guys that broke out last year, Sam Laporta and Trey McBride, one in year 2, one in year 3, both on plus offenses in Arizona and Detroit. So you've got three really strong offenses represented here. You got Travis Kelce, Trey McBride, Sam Laporta. If you had to pick one, which way are you going?
I'm going to answer this question quickly, two different ways. If I had to pick one, and we actually had an example of this, if people want to see, go over to the Fantasy Alarm YouTube channel. On the Friday show, Theo and I drafted a team. This is tight end premium. All the tight ends fell to the point where we had to say, let's pick the tight end one off the board. In that case, I did take Sam Laporta. We did take Sam Laporta, right? So that is the answer. If you get to it and you have to pick one, they're just falling too far, I'm taking Laporta. Now, my real personal advice is don't be the guy that takes the first tight end. Because too many times I've seen teams take the first tight end off the board and then the next tight end goes 2 rounds later and you're just bleeding value you didn't have to bleed. For me, from this group, I'll take, if somebody takes Laporta first and Kelce falls like a round, I'll take Kelce. And then in the next group, I'm not really taking McBride at the top of the next tier, so I'm not really taking him either. So my advice, honestly, is to wait on tight end. If it gets crazy, though, and I have to take one like we did, it's got to be Laporta, right?
Yeah, it's Laporta. You're right on Laporta, and I'll say a little bit of a pushback on Laporta being an edge this year. Coop, 120 targets for a rookie tight end. Like Laporta getting his 80 catches, obviously that's elite. 10 touchdowns, elite. 889 yards, we would have liked to have seen more yardage. But Coop, when it comes down to it, 120 targets as a rookie. I brought up the receiving upside for Jahmyr Gibbs. We talked about where we all love the sun god. But at the end of the day, if Sam Laporta gets 10% more targets this year, not like a crazy ask, then you're talking about crossing 130 targets. You're talking about elite range of target earning at the tight end position, despite a young age, despite it being initial to the team. Like, I think that not enough is talked about Laporta being a positive regression guy just in terms of usage. So I'm on Laporta as well. And Coop, that team is nasty. I encourage anybody to go back and watch it. We have a Breece Hall, Sam Laporta team. Take it down to the next tier of tight ends. This is a really fun one. We see Mark Andrews sort of and Kincaid in their own mini tier. Let's leave those two alone. Let's specifically look at Evan Engram versus Kyle Pitts versus a surged up George Kittle, where people are still sort of pushing Kittle up, betting on the Brandon Ayuk trade actually going down. And Kittle also had a career high in yardage last year. So it's not like he's a terrible pick. So Engram, Pitts, or Kittle, if you had to pick one of those three, which way are you going?
I think that's the first question. If you truly think Ayuk is gone, then draft Kittle. If you don't think he's gone, then I'm not taking him, right? And even though Evan Engram is my baby and I keep an autographed Evan Engram rookie card within reach at all times, right? I keep one in my wallet. I pull out a picture of my kid, and right next to that's a picture of Evan Engram, right? Like, he's my baby. But even then, I got to go with Kyle Pitts. We're talking about insane upside with this player. He already had 1,000 yards as a 21-year-old, which literally no one's ever done, right? Just like Evan Engram. Evan Engram was a top 5 rookie with Eli Manning. Then he was terrible with Daniel Jones, who was not a good passer of the football. And then he's been top 5 back-to-back years with Trevor Lawrence. If you look at Kyle Pitts, he was 1,000 yards with the shell of Matt Ryan, garbage with Desmond Ridder. Now he gets an opportunity with Kirk Cousins. I almost said Christian Kirk. I guess he is a Christian Kirk technically, Kirk Cousins. But I think that the upside for this player is higher than any other tight end in the league. Legitimately, if I had to bet on a tight end, again, his floor isn't as high, but if I had to bet on a tight end to break the record for receiving yards this season, if you told me, oh, hey, by the way, I'm from the future, one of the tight ends breaks the record for receiving yards this year, I would bet on Kyle Pitts just because his unique size, speed, how he lines up a wide receiver, and now being able to just steal a quarterback away from the Vikings, one of the most pass-happy quarterbacks we've seen in decades. Like it is a dream setup of this group. I like Pitts. If his floor was safer, everyone would pick him higher. It's not the ceiling people are scared of; it's the floor, right?
You're also get with where he goes in ADP. You're getting drafters punishing him on what he did the last 2 seasons. So
Don't care.
Yeah, there's a lot of every league you get into, you're going to have a couple guys saying, I'm never going to draft Kyle Pitts again because it's burned me 2 years in a row. But you brought up the incredible rookie season he had. The only reason that year was not like a nuclear scoring year was because the total touchdowns were very low compared to the yardage and the receptions. But he had Matt Ryan that year, and Matt Ryan at that stage of his career, we can agree is behind Kirk Cousins at this stage of his career. Mm-hmm. So for me, like he gets the quarterback upgrade. You also have the sort of rational coaching playing in where we don't have to worry about Arthur Smith. And Kyle Pitts, we know he can make big plays downfield, and we'll combine that with the lower ADOT looks where he's going to catch balls around the line of scrimmage. And Coop, we talked about Sam Laporta in terms of targets. Like Kyle Pitts could have 125 targets this year quite easily. And I also think Darnell Mooney is not massive competition for him in terms of him at the wide receiver 2 spot. So I'm going to go Kyle Pitts as well. It's hard to get away from Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram back-to-back seasons as a top 5 tight end, last year tight end 2. I do think the target competition in Jacksonville is going to be a little bit better this year. Healthy Christian Kirk, and I think Brian Thomas is a thing. Brian Thomas is definitely a thing. So we'll both go Pitts on that one, Coop.
Yeah, I'll throw in so with Evan Ingram, he's going to be just fine because Doug Peterson loves tight end screens. That's what creates the floor, but it also hurts the ceiling a little bit because it keeps his ADOT so low, right? And he's also not that big. He's like 6'3", so the touchdowns weren't there. If you give 2 more touchdowns to Evan Ingram last year, so he had 6 instead of 4, he's the tight end 1 in fantasy. With Kyle Pitts, you mentioned how he didn't score many touchdowns. I mean, Matt Ryan was never really a great red zone quarterback. Julio Jones played with him for a decade, and he only had 1 season with more than 8 touchdowns. And there was 10. It's not like some of these guys are scoring, Randy Moss scored 23 touchdowns.
Yeah, it's definitely a fun one at the tight end. Our last 2 questions are quarterback related. And Coop, just as a general preface, last year was the year of almost early round quarterback where Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, that tier of guys started to go at the 2-3 turn. Now you're getting into drafts where these guys don't go until round 5. So it's been a really big shift in terms of where drafters want to draft the quarterback. I think part of that is because of how successful waiver wire quarterbacks were last year. Guys like CJ Stroud, plus Anthony Richardson, people thinking, Anthony Richardson would have been this incredible value. So for a number of reasons, quarterbacks have gotten pushed down, maybe a little too far. But let's talk about the big 3 at the top. It's actually the big 4 at the top because sometimes you see Lamar pushed into this range. So it's Josh Allen, who was tremendous last year, 15 rushing touchdowns. Jalen Hurts, again, 15 rushing touchdowns. Patrick Mahomes, who finished with his lowest point per game total relative to the position in his entire career, where he, aside from the year he kind of played behind Alex Smith. But Patrick Mahomes finished as QB 10 overall in points per game. Kansas City obviously really upgraded with Worthy, with Hollywood Brown. They'll have Rashee Rice, they'll have Kelsey. They're trending up. Mahomes looks awesome the other day in the preseason. Behind the back passes in the preseason. I mean, this guy's just unreal. Lamar Jackson tailing off. So Allen, Hurts, Mahomes, Lamar. Which of these 4 is your favorite in terms of this ADP bunch at the quarterback spot?
The cop-out answer that I actually do abide by in most cases is whoever I can get cheapest. But
yeah, that's not appropriate, but not today.
But that's not answering this question exactly. Today, because again, this happens. Like when you're in your draft, your back does go up against the wall at a certain point where sometimes I look at the board and I hate every running back, wide receiver, tight end, and all these guys are there, and you got to pick one. I take Jalen Hurts. Another reason these guys are going so early last year, Theo, is if you look at the first round, and it's such a copycat game. Everyone was so going crazy about stacks last year. Last year, the first round would go A.J. Brown, Travis Kelce, Stephon Diggs, and then the second round, everyone would be stacking, right? And then we realized you don't have to do that in redraft, And hopefully, and everybody kind of came back to earth. For me, if I'm on the clock and I have to take one, I'm going to take Jalen Hurts. I know it hurts that Travis Kelce's gone. His little move where he, takes the ball and moves it up 6 inches before every snap, especially on the tush push, that kind of is out the window. They even caught him towards the end of last year doing that, and that's kind of done now. But still, I think a play that is successful 37 of 40 times, and a couple times it didn't work, there's some fumbled snaps in there, like it's a automatic play. I think he's going to have a bunch of rushing touchdowns again. With Josh Allen, I just worry that not only does Diggs, I'm not even as worried as much about the Diggs losing the targets. It's the fact that this guy was averaging 70 first downs, Stephon Diggs. I mean, that is a staple of your offense. That is the beam in the center of your house holding everything up. And either multiple people need to come in and hold that up, or a guy like Kincaid hopefully is going to come in and do that. But without him there, man, it's gonna be some growing pains. So I'm taking Jalen Hurts in that spot. He has all the same weapons he had last year. The tush push is still alive and well, and Saquon Barkley's gonna help him out a little bit. So if I have to pick one, I'm going Hurts. I got to go mobile upside. Yeah,
and I'll say I think Jalen Hurts goes north of 30 passing touchdowns this year. You saw 22 and 23 for back-to-back seasons. I think that's going to be one big change with Kellen Moore. Saquon, whether he smashes at ADP or not, it's the best running back that Jalen Hurts has ever played with, and I think they're going to be absolutely living in the red zone. A lot of pressure on Nick Sirianni to get it done with this team, and I think they do. I think this team's going to score a lot of points. I think Kellen Moore is going to be a head coach a year from now based on what he does with this offense. And Jalen Hurts, we saw the 15 rushing touchdowns, 13 the year before. He could regress to like 10, but it's not going to go away. But I think that he'll more than make up for it with the passing touchdowns and the passing yardage. He's been at 3,700 and 3,800 the last 2 years. I think we're looking at 4,500 passing yards, like 31 passing touchdowns and like 10 rushing touchdowns. He's the QB1 overall. And we can argue that Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown are the best wide receiver combo in the league. You can argue with, there's other combinations that are really strong, but they would definitely be in the top 5 along with guys like Waddle and Hill. So I'm going to agree with you. It's Jalen Hurts for me, but it's splitting hairs. I'll say Josh Allen, it's interesting because I do think that there's times where Josh Allen is a really easy click. I know we took him the other day. He sort of falls to a level where you want some exposure to him. I'll also say, like you brought up Diggs, Gabe Davis was also a huge big play spike week guy for him. So if you're looking at like the counting stats over the last few years, Gabe Davis and Diggs combined, like the loss of those touchdown catches is definitely troubling. But I think Buffalo will figure it out. Allen, based on where you take him at ADP, is not going to hurt you. But if it's him versus Hurts, I'm going Hurts. Again, a really strong tier. Let's go to the next tier of quarterbacks, though. You've got Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, and Kyler Murray. 3 guys where we could probably paint a picture for any of them. They're all really, really exciting. Obviously, 2 guys, and then Kyler Murray, like revenge tour after he returned last year from injury and looked really strong. Adds Marvin Harrison Jr., adds Trey Benson. There's a lot to like about this Arizona offense. Which way are you going with these 3 guys, Coop?
Yeah, I find myself having a hard time taking Stroud as a QB5, even if I were to rank him there because of the arbitration with guys like Jordan Love and even Joe Burrow. It's like Jordan Love outscored CJ Stroud last year. You know what I mean? In fantasy, they both of them, they were going QB 24 and 28. So there were massive values, created huge leverage. But I think that sometimes we get a little out over our skis with these guys. If Patrick Mahomes, the unanimous best quarterback in football, isn't the QB1, that means we need to treat fantasy football differently than real life football. And that means we need to lean into mobile upside, right? So if I'm on the clock, I'm taking Anthony Richardson. I just think that and he came out and looked good throwing the ball last year. That's the big difference for me, is that when I was watching those couple games, it didn't feel like a Justin Fields situation where it was complete panic and complete collapsing of the pocket, and then he would score a 75-yard rushing touchdown and everything was just fine. Like, it looked like a guy running an offense, throwing the ball, and then when it got down there, taking it himself. That's what I want to see. I love Kyler Murray at ADP, but if you're going to put those two guys on the board and I got to pick one, I think I got to take Richardson. And I even wrote a full article on why I love Kyler Murray, and he is getting steamed up a little bit where it's now kind of close. But if I have to pick one, I think I got to go Richardson, man. What do you think?
I'm with you, and I'm fine drafting Kyler Murray. I'm actually okay drafting CJ Stroud. You are starting to see Kyler going like sometimes ahead of Richardson. A lot of that's the correlation where people want to combine Trey McBride or Marvin Harrison Jr. or both with Kyler Murray. But it's Anthony Richardson. And we talked about Josh Allen and we talked about Jalen Hurts. I think Anthony Richardson leads all quarterbacks in rushing touchdowns this year. He's going to be like a weapon of mass destruction. And one thing you talked about, he looked better as a passer than sort of a lot of the film guys told us that he would be.
Right.
And he's got an underrated set of pass catching weapons. We know Michael Pittman is a very talented wide receiver. Josh Downs, when healthy. Adonai Mitchell, not for a guy you'd start in fantasy, but Alec Pierce is like a big athletic body. So all four of those guys are day two. They're an airport team. You know those guys play football, except for Josh Downs. Josh Downs, he might be like a coaching staff guy in that scenario. But they have all these tall, big wide receivers with day two NFL draft capital. They're going to be a better offense than I think some people are letting on in terms of the passing game. It's Anthony Richardson. Now we got to go rapid fire here, Coop. Let's end it out. Let's go with a running back below round 10, rapid fire that you want to walk away with a lot of this year.
So I'll go with Blake Corum. Just because we've seen time and time again. And again, I'm not saying that Kyren Williams is going to be exactly these names that I'm about to give you, but we've seen time and time again a low round undrafted type guy or, day 3 type running back have really good production. And then the team says, wow, that was really good. Let's get some more good running backs in here. And then all of a sudden it turns out, well, maybe he's not amazing. Maybe both these guys are good, or maybe this other guy might be even better. We saw it with Dameon Pierce, where he was amazing and getting the Angry Run of the Year award. And then all of a sudden Devin Singletary shows up and it's like, wow, maybe Dameon Pierce isn't that good. We just had a good offense. We saw it with Tyler Algier. We saw it with James Robinson. I know he got hurt, but I mean, they replaced him pretty quickly. We saw it with Michael. People are excited about Michael Carter, right? People are excited about Philip Lindsay. It happens all the time to these guys, and I wouldn't be shocked if Blake Corum came in and they said, looking around, they said, wow, Kyren Williams is so good at X, Y, and Z, but Blake Corum is really good at pass protection or goal line, and he carves himself out a role. So don't be surprised if Blake Corum carves out a role. And then, of course, now we're in handcuff plus territory, right? So I really do like that idea. Like, it's not like some of these teams, they have Breece Hall or Bijan Robinson picked as a top 10 pick, and then they bring in somebody else. Well, now, the door isn't open like that. With Kyren Williams, maybe this is a situation like we saw with Chris Carson, where he just keeps the job and Rashad Penny goes away. But this is a team that doesn't really care about draft picks, and they use a decent one after years of trading a bunch away on Blake Corum.
Yeah, so I love Blake Corum. I think that's a great answer. It's a guy that you can get sometimes around 10, sometimes he steams up to round 9, but the contingent upside in that offense, plus potentially being a handcuff plus back, it's like Kyren was so effective around the goal line last year, but Blake Corum is sort of tailor-made to score touchdowns. He showed it time and time again in his Michigan career. So you have a contingent upside play there. I'll take a guy with 2 outs, a guy who has 2 pathways toward contingent upside in one of the league's best offenses. I am huge on Devon Achane, and then you've got Raheem Mostert. You've got 2 running backs in Miami that we're going to be in our starting lineups every single week. And if one of those 2 guys goes down, Jalen Wright to the absolute moon. And based on the quality of the offense, he would be a guy who could potentially win leagues. He's got also potential that he's just good enough that he carves out some carries for himself. But for me, it's a Raheem Mostert. Everything went really well last year, but this is an older back. And the last 2 years, he stayed on the field in Miami. But before that, this was a guy that would play like half the year in San Francisco. When you combine that with the age, I think Jalen Wright is a guy based on the quality of the offense and the fact that I can get him in like round 12. I can't pass it up. Let's go wide receiver.
The double handcuff, man. The Jalen Wright right now, the player that I think is most likely to be the top waiver at some point during the season.
And he'll be a 50% plus guy if either one of these running backs gets hurt.
Right.
This offense is going to score 30 plus a game. Give us rapid fire a wide receiver after round 10 that you're into drafting. I can already guess your guy too, by the way.
You think?
It's going to be your boy down in New Orleans, Rashid
Shaheed. It is. Yeah, look at you.
I know
we've done too many shows together, brother.
That's right.
Well, there you go. That's how rapid does that get? It doesn't get any more rapid than Theo saying who my player is and me saying, go over to Player Profiler, check out how good he is. And then go to Fantasy Alarm. I have an article up on Rashid Shaheed, a full article just on why this offense is custom built for him to have big upside. And the hint is Clint Kubiak coming over from San Francisco, where they use a fullback and 2 wide receivers get consolidated targets. The first thing they did was go out and sign a fullback when they got Clint Kubiak.
Yeah, and I think that one's a really, really fun one. And Shaheed's definitely one that I could have gone with here as well. and I have a good amount of him in Dynasty, in Redraft. I think this is going to be the year. Not a lot of competition besides obviously Chris Olave and Kamara in terms of wide receivers or tight ends. But for me, I'll throw another guy out there. One guy that's starting to slip in drafts because he's going to miss the first half of the season. But Josh Downs, you're starting to see go in the round 14 and round 15. I think when he comes back from injury, the way you build your team is going to have to support this. But usually when I'm drafting a guy in round 14, round 15, I'm not depending on them at all. It's always a little bit of a lottery or a handcuff or some situation. But with Josh Downs, I think I could get a wide receiver 3 immediately when he comes back. This is a guy who set the Indianapolis record for receptions as a rookie. He, by all accounts, was breaking through in OTAs in an early training camp. And now you get the injury discount. So I'm going to take Josh Downs in round 15, starting to see that price in FFPC, and I'm clicking that button a lot. Let's go to the tight end spot, Coop. Give us your favorite sleeper tight end.
My favorite deep sleeper and the guy going outside the top 10 rounds I'm most likely to draft are two different ones. Why don't we do the guy that's a more realistic pick, and then on another show, we'll get into our deeper sleeper.
You got it. Go for it. All
right. So the guy outside the top 10 rounds I'm most likely to draft right now is Pat Freiermuth. And again, this is a bet against the Ayuk trade. If there is no Ayuk trade, then Freiermuth, it's wheels up. If Ayuk gets traded there, you might have to drop Freiermuth to waivers and find another upside tight end. But this is a player that everyone thinks is good. No one ever says Pat Freiermuth sucks. The problem was Deontay Johnson was getting 9 targets a game over the last 4 years. He's gone. The other problem is Kenny Pickett is not a good football player. Neither is Mason Rudolph. Neither is Mitch Trubisky. They didn't have a good quarterback in the building since Ben Roethlisberger. Russell Wilson, say what you will, he was top 5 in touchdown to interception ratio last year. He scored more touchdowns combined between passing and rushing than Patrick Mahomes last year. This guy can still play. And I think that him coming in here is going to be huge. It's Pickens as the top dog, and then Freiermuth. And Arthur Smith's offense with the Falcons, 173 targets to the tight ends. Kyle Pitts got 90 of them, same amount as George Kittle. I think Freiermuth is a upside play for the first time after I've been fading him for years. Now I'm in.
Yeah, so you get him right around like tight end 13 prices, and that sounds expensive, but there's a huge gap between what we see at like tight end 11 and tight end 13. Muth, when you look at him historically, Coop, over like all time, he's top 10 all time in receptions by a tight end in years 1 and years 2. And same thing with targets. Last year was a disappointing year, but yeah, there's a lot of arguments for taking him. Also, I love how you brought up the tight end success last year in Atlanta. If you could combine Jonnu and Kyle Pitts, that's a nice player to have. I'll go deeper, and I'll say this is based on positional eligibility. I think that there's a chance that Taysom Hill is going to be a weekly thing.
Oh my goodness, dude! All right.
I think Taysom Hill might lead the New Orleans Saints in rushing touchdowns this year.
No,
and I'm able to get him in round 17. NFFC. You're starting to see a lot of the sharp NFFC drafters auto drafting him when he's there in round 17, round 18. This is a guy you can take in the last round of your fantasy league. If he doesn't get that sort of consistent usage this year, you can send him right back to the waiver wire. But he's a guy that's literally free. And with Kendre Miller's struggles and Alvin Kamara's age and the lack of weapons in New Orleans, I think Taysom Hill could be a weekly thing in this Kubiak offense. And if I'm wrong, it costs you an 18th rounder. It's literally free.
I don't disagree. I disagree with the fact that he's tight end eligible. He should be flex eligible only, like DH. But hey, the rules.
So it's weird. It's like in FFPC, he's QB. He's a QB.
Which is useless.
But in NFFC, which is an FFPC competitor, he's listed at tight end. He's also listed on tight end and sleeper. Right. And I'd have to double check ESPN and Yahoo, but depending on your format, like Coop, if we knew that he was going to get the second most carries in New Orleans with weekly carries at the tight end position, plus we know that he's a spike week guy with touchdowns, philosophical, to all respect to Coop, the tight end whisperer, draft yourself some Taysom Hill if he's tight end eligible. And stick with us here at Redraft in 5, where we drop in shows like this every single week. We're also starting in season going to be dropping our waiver wire show, a little short 10 minutes waivers, all you need to know for the whole entire week. Find me at PlayerProfiler, find my guy Coop at Fantasy Alarm, and we'll see you next week.